What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about the review scores for Little Nightmares 3. The game is just a few days away, and I wasn't really sure when to expect these, but here they are. And, the scores are lower than I thought they were going to be. I made a YouTube short couple days back where I looked at the last two games, and this has really been a franchise that's never scored as high as it probably should. The first game only got a 78 on Metacritic. Second game got an 82. Really, both of those games I think are far better than those scores suggest. So 78, 82. Now this game comes out, it's got a 73. So, the color thing doesn't help. You see the first two games, they're in green, then this one is more of that yellow, like it's a middling, and that I think just visually, less appealing versus the other two. I want to talk, obviously a little bit about the specifics of what people were saying, but just to throw out the number there. And that's I guess what I would say is that's a point drop. You go from 78 to an 82. That's 0.4, right? It's not even a full point jump between 1 and 2. But an 82 to a 73, you're losing almost a full point from one to the other. And then in terms of the reviews themselves, well, again, as a whole, I thought it was going to be higher. Okay, I predicted, I believe, a higher score for the game. In terms of the scores, it is kind of split. There's actually a very good amount of 8s. So again, you see the 73, maybe that scares you off. There's actually one 9. There's a couple 8.5, some, I think maybe like 6 or so, and then quite a few 8s. I think what really brings it down is, it's got its 7.5s and whatnot, but it's got a lot of 6s. I think 6 might actually be the most common number. There might be like 7 or 8 6s, a couple 6.5s, 68, and then a bunch of 7s as well. So therein lies, what kind of drags the score down. And, again, as we always say, and as I always say for these videos, it really depends on the person that you're reading. I try to read as many of these before I make this video as possible. At the end of the day, as I always say to people, make your own determination. I don't go based off numbers myself. I go more based off of what people say, like the specifics. And also, I kind of decide for myself. I knew I was going to get this game a long time ago, and a 73. Again, it's definitely not as high. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's what I thought. It's lower than I thought it was going to be, but it's not going to stop me from getting the game when I get it. Okay, so I'm still excited for the game. And again, it does kind of depend on who you're reading. The general consensus, though, and this is what I kind of do in these videos, I try to find, okay, well, maybe what's the similarities between the 6s and the 9s, right? It does seem like it's a pretty familiar game. If you played 1 and 2, this game plays right alongside it, and it doesn't seem to really take any risks. I saw a couple reviews that were even calling out the enemies or monsters or just kind of, the people, say in the background, they play a key role in the lore for these games. I think these games are very, very special with all of the theory and explained videos that you can find on YouTube. Number one, amazing creators that have done it. And number two, it's just deep. This is a game for, not to make all these puns, but for being so small, right? Your characters are so small, but also for being like a 3-hour game. There is a lot packed in there, and so people being able to kind of theorize and figure out what really is happening, some kind of, hidden meanings behind things, that has become incredibly important. I would argue the most important thing for this game has been that, in my opinion, because there's not too much behind the gameplay. There, the visuals are very, very impressive, but it's mainly, kind of what this game is doing without directly telling you. It doesn't hold your hand too much. You kind of have to figure it out. That's been a very special thing, and that is, I would say, the ultimate weakness based off of some of the stuff that I've seen, is that the story is lacking. Again, maybe even some of the characters don't even make sense, in terms of fitting in with that larger picture. Those are pretty big, story specifically. Now it is that is subjective. One person might like the story more than another. I saw a lot of positives with the visuals and even some of the intensity that the game has. So those were a couple positives. The co-op online thing, I will say, I think it is right to kind of call this out. It's something that I think I made a video when it very first was announced, and I was negative towards it. I think a lot of people are. To have online, that's awesome, and it was the natural, continuation point, but to do it where it's only local. And I mean, like, these two characters are directly next to each other in the game, right? And you cannot play this game local co-op. That is a huge mistake. It really should have been reversed at some point. I guess I will say the one thing against my, like, to play devil's advocate, the amount of people that do local co-op statistically is very, very low. Sadly, it's a dying, like, medium or genre of games, local co-op games. That's the truth, but that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it a positive thing. It is, in my opinion, a massive negative thing that we've lost that aspect of video games. So really across the board, I've seen people, generally praise the co-op nature of it, saying, it works, it's fine, it's all good, but it should have been local on top of online, which I would, even without playing, I think that's something that you can have an opinion on, even if you haven't touched the game, because, those are things I would just prefer were changed in the first place. And then in terms of there's like gameplay and puzzle solving, right? Those are probably two of the other, or maybe the last two, important features of these games. In terms of, again, like I'd say combat, I saw combat be mentioned a few times. I don't know how deep the game is going to go with combat, but I saw some actually praise it, some say not so good. And then again, when it comes to the actual gameplay or puzzles, there's, on the negative side, it becomes repetitive too quickly, right? Positive side is it's not a big deal. Like, it feels okay, and it kind of worked for the game. So that one seemed, at least to me, what I was reading, seemed much more split and just kind of based off of, the person that was actually playing the game. So I'm still excited. I really am. Again, I think the main negative takeaway, I guess, is the story has these concerns, and that is a big deal, because I think, you go through these games and they're kind of rich without maybe even feeling like it at the time. They don't take too long. I think I saw some people talk about that it's in between like 4 or 5 hours, which I feel like would actually be on the higher end. I die a lot in these games, so maybe it would take me even longer than that, but pretty in line, maybe actually slightly longer than Little Nightmares 1 and 2, like the average of those games, if it pushes 5 hours. So I'm definitely still excited. I'm definitely still playing it. I'll have my own review. We'll make some videos talking about this game, but that's just the one thing that I'll keep an eye on. But I guess I was always going to keep an eye, on how good the story was going to be. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.